Hey guys, tonight we are peeling back the shining visor on one of history's most romanticized figures, the medieval knight. Picture him now, astride a powerful warhorse, clad in gleaming steel, a banner of his noble house fluttering in the breeze. He is the very image of honor, courage, and chivalry. Now, take that image and add the distinct, overpowering aroma of unwashed laundry, stale sweat, and questionable sanitation. The truth is, the daily reality of a knight was far less about glamorous quests and far more about surviving the filth, the food, and the sheer, bone-grinding discomfort of it all. You probably won't survive this, but it's a fascinating journey to imagine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know down below where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always a treat to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story doesn't begin with a choice. It doesn't start with you, as a bright-eyed youth, declaring your ambition to serve the king. It begins with the simple, unchangeable fact of your birth. You open your eyes for the first time not in a sterile, quiet room, but likely in a bustling, drafty bedchamber, thick with the smell of wood smoke, sweat, and herbal concoctions meant to ward off evil spirits and infection. With a 50-50 success rate at best. The first and most important historical fact of knighthood is that it was, with very few exceptions, a members-only club, and the membership fee was being borne to the right parents. You are a son of a nobleman, a landholder, a man of some standing. If you were born a baker's son, or a farmer's boy, your chances of ever touching a suit of armor, let alone wearing one, are practically zero. So, congratulations. You've won the lottery of birth. Your prize is a life of violence, discomfort, and unending obligation. Lucky you. Your home is a manor house, or perhaps even a small castle. It sounds grand, doesn't it? But let's wander through its halls in your tiny shoes. The heart of the home is the great hall, and it's less of a majestic court and more of a chaotic, multi-purpose community center. There's a fire pit in the center of the room, or a massive hearth against one wall. Smoke billows upwards, seeking a simple hole in the roof, and on a windy day, most of it comes right back down, making your eyes water and leaving a permanent, smoky film on every surface. The high, vaulted ceilings that look so impressive in drawings are, in reality, cobweb-infested chasms of darkness. The only light comes from the fire and a few precious, sputtering tallow candles, made from animal fat, and smelling exactly like you'd expect burning fat to smell. Look down at your feet. You are not walking on polished stone or plush carpets. You are walking on a floor of packed earth or rough flagstones, covered with a thick layer of rushes or straw. And this is where we find a wonderfully disgusting little tidbit of medieval life. These floor coverings were a medieval solution to insulation and comfort, but they were also, essentially, a disposable garbage can. Throughout the day, bones from dinner, scraps of food, spilled ale, and anything else you can imagine gets dropped onto the floor and promptly disappears into the straw. It's not changed daily, or even weekly. New layers are simply thrown on top of the old ones, creating a compressed, layered cake of filth, grease, and rotting organic matter. The great scholar Erasmus, visiting England centuries later, would complain bitterly about these floors, describing a bottom layer that sometimes remained for 20 years, harboring spit, vomit, the urine of dogs and men, and all kinds of other unpleasantness. Your first playground is a bioactive compost heap. It's a wonder anyone survived childhood, frankly. And the smells don't stop there. There is no plumbing. No serene, white-tiled bathroom down the hall. There are chamber pots, which are used by everyone and then unceremoniously emptied out the nearest window. A cry of "Guard as low. Watch out for the water," was a common courtesy in medieval towns, but less so within your own home's walls. You just learned to not linger under the windows. As for personal hygiene, bathing is a rare and complicated event. It requires heating huge amounts of water and was often seen as a luxurious indulgence, even a bit decadent. People wash their hands and face, but a full-body bath might happen only a few times a year. Deodorant is a sprig of rosemary tucked into your tunic. It's not fighting the bacteria, you see. It's just putting up a slightly more pleasant-smelling fence in front of it. A losing battle, really. In the midst of this sensory soup, where is your family? Your father, the Lord, is a distant figure of authority. You see him at meals, perhaps, where he presides over the head of a long, splintery trestle table. He is busy with the management of his lands, with local disputes, with his own military obligations to the baron or king above him. He doesn't have time for gentle parenting. Your mother is a powerful figure in her own right, the lady of the manor, but she is buried under a mountain of responsibilities. She oversees the food stores, the weaving, the servants, the brewing of ale, and the raising of all the children. And there are likely many of you. Historians still argue whether the high rates of infant and child mortality in the Middle Ages led to parents being emotionally distant from their children, a sort of psychological self-defense against inevitable loss. You are one of several sons, and your value, especially if you're not the firstborn who will inherit the land and title, is in your potential as a strategic asset. You are a future warrior, a chess piece to be used in the great game of feudal politics. Your path has already been chosen for you, and it leads directly away from this smoky, smelly, but familiar home. Your real education is about to begin. Your world, that familiar universe of smoky air and rush-covered floors, shrinks to the size of a memory in the jolting discomfort of a horse-drawn cart, or perhaps, if your father is feeling generous, a pony of your own. You are 7 years old. At an age where a child today might be worried about learning to read or which cartoon to watch, you are being sent away from home to begin your career. It's the medieval equivalent of a corporate transfer, except you're the male, and you have no say in the destination. This isn't a punishment, it is the way of things. This practice of fostering, sending noble sons to be raised in the household of a more powerful lord, is a cornerstone of your society. It builds alliances, teaches young men the proper customs of the aristocracy, and ensures everyone knows their place in the grand, rickety pyramid of feudalism. You are leaving your family to join another, and your job is to learn, to serve, and above all, not to be a nuisance. You arrive at a castle that makes your home look like a quaint garden shed. The walls are higher, the gatehouse more menacing, and the courtyard buzzes with a level of activity you've never seen. Men-at-arms drill with spears, squires rush about on important errands, and the air is thick with the sounds of the blacksmith's hammer and the stench of 100 horses. You are led, a small and trembling figure in a new, scratchy woolen tunic, into the presence of the lord and lady who are now, for all intents and purposes, your new boss and supervisor. You are a page, the lowest rank on the ladder to knighthood, and your training begins immediately. Forget learning swordplay. Your first lessons are in humility and servitude. Your primary role is to be an attendant, a tiny shadow that flits about at the beck and call of the lady of the castle. You will run messages, fetch things, and help her and her ladies-in-waiting with their needlework, mostly by trying not to tangle the expensive threads. Your most important and public duty, however, takes place in the great hall. While you once ate at the lower end of your father's table, you now serve at the high table of a man who could crush your father's entire estate with a casual command. You and the other pages are the waiters, the busboys, and the sommeliers of the medieval world. You bring the basins of scented water for hand-washing before the meal. You carry the heavy platters of roasted meat from the kitchens. You learn to pour wine, a terrifying task that involves a heavy jug, an expensive tablecloth, and a lord who does not appreciate drips on his velvet sleeve. This is where your education in etiquette begins, and it is brutally specific. You must learn not to slurp your own food, should you be given any from the high table. You learn to stand quietly and attentively, not to pick your nose, not to scratch yourself, and to never, ever speak unless you are directly addressed. There were even handy guides for this, like the wonderfully named Babee's book from the 15th century, which gave advice like, don't put your dirty fingers in your cup, and don't spit across the table. Solid advice for any era, really. One of your duties might be to act as a cupbearer, a position of immense trust. You hold the Lord's goblet, you fill it when required, and you do it all with a precise, kneeling deference. It's a performance, and a single mistake, a stumble, a spill, a moment of distraction, could earn you a sharp rebuke or a swift clout to the head and front of the entire court. But where is the path to knighthood in all this? It's there, woven between the endless chores. When you are not serving at table, you are receiving a nobleman's education. The castle's chaplain might teach you your letters, basic sums, and enough Latin to stumble through a prayer. You will be taught to speak proper French, the language of courtly life and poetry. You play games, lots of games. But they aren't just for fun. Chess is your first introduction to strategy and tactics. Wrestling with the other pages teaches you about leverage and balance. You learn to ride, not on the terrifying war horses you see in the stables, but on smaller, more manageable ponies, building the equestrian skills that will one day be essential for your survival. You might even be introduced to the Lord's falconer, learning the basics of handling the prized hunting birds. It's all part of a curriculum designed to shape you into a well-rounded aristocrat. Still, you're a child, and you are living in a world of adults, governed by their rules. You are at the very bottom of the pecking order. Knights ignore you, squires order you around, and the master-at-arms is a figure of pure terror whose job is to enforce discipline with a switch. And this is where a darker, more political layer to your new life emerges. Historians still argue whether this system of fostering was purely educational, or if it also served as a polite form of hostage-taking. By holding the sons of his vassals, a great lord could ensure their father's loyalty. You are a living, breathing promise that your father will behave. It's a deeply uncomfortable thought as you lie in your small cot at night, in a dormitory shared with a dozen other boys, the sounds of the castle settling around you. You are not just a student, you are collateral. The shining armor and noble quest you might have dreamed of feel impossibly distant. Your reality is the sting of a reprimand, the weight of a heavy serving dish, and the deep, aching exhaustion of a 7-year-old trying to survive in a world that sees him not as a child, but as a project in the making. The years as a page slowly blur into one another, a long stretch of quiet obedience and hastily eaten leftovers. But now, you are 14. You've shot up in height, Your voice has begun its awkward descent into manhood, and you no longer look like a child playing dress-up in a tunic. You've proven you can follow orders without crying or complaining, and so you are rewarded with a promotion. You are no longer a page. You are now a squire. This sounds like a significant step up the corporate ladder, and in many ways, it is. You are leaving behind the domestic world of the ladies' chambers and entering the exclusively male sphere of the night. You've traded serving wine for sharpening swords. The bad news is, your new job description consists almost entirely of grime, sweat, and very heavy lifting. You are assigned to a specific knight. He might be a seasoned veteran with a network of scars and a quiet, intimidating demeanor, or a younger, ambitious knight eager to make a name for himself. Either way, this man is now the center of your universe. Your life is tied to his. You sleep on a pallet near him, you eat when he eats, and you tend to his every need. Forget the relative anonymity of being one of several pages. You are now in a one-on-one apprenticeship where your every action, or inaction, is noticed. Your first duty every morning, before the sun has even thought about rising, is to the stables, and specifically to your knight's horses. You quickly learn that his war horse, his destrier, is 1,000 times more valuable than you are. It's a finely tuned, incredibly expensive instrument of war, and its care is your sacred responsibility. This isn't a gentle morning ride. It's the meticulous maintenance of a high-performance machine. You muck out the stall, which is just as fragrant a task as you remember from the castle floors of your childhood home. You haul heavy buckets of water. You groom the massive animal, its muscles like coiled steel beneath the coarse hair. You learn the precise mix of oats and feed required to keep it in peak fighting condition. The destrio is often aggressive and bred for battle, so this is a dangerous dance. A careless moment could earn you a kick that could easily break your ribs. You spend more time ensuring the comfort and health of this horse than you do on your own. Once the animals are tended to, you move on to your next soul-crushingly tedious task, the armor. A knight's suit of plate armor is his lifeline, but it is also a rust magnet. Your job is to keep it clean, functional, and gleaming. This isn't a quick polish with a cloth. It's a process called scouring, and it is your personal, daily battle against oxidation. You take the dozens of individual pieces, the helmet, the gorget for the throat, the pauldrons for the shoulders, the gauntlets, the greaves for your shins, and you get to work. Your primary cleaning agents are a box of sand and a jug of vinegar. You spend hours, literally hours, rubbing every plate, every rivet, every buckle, scouring away any hint of rust or tarnish. For stubborn spots, a quirky but effective cleaning solution was sometimes used: stale urine, whose ammonia content was great for cutting through grime. So you spend your afternoons smelling like a pickle salad that's been left in a public lavatory, rubbing away until your fingers are raw and your back aches. The upside, if you can call it that, is that you are finally close to the action. When your knight practices in the tilt yard, you are there. You are his training partner, his equipment manager, and his glorified cheerleader. You'll stand for hours holding a heavy wooden shield, the quinton, while he thunders past on his horse, practicing his lance strikes. The jarring impact rattles your bones. You help him arm for practice duels, learning the complex layering and strapping required. You start to handle the weapons yourself, not in formal lessons, but through imitation and grueling repetition. You swing a heavy, blunt practice sword until your arms feel like they might fall off. You are learning the art of war, not through theory, but through sheer physical osmosis and exhaustion. During a tournament, Your role is critical but utterly without glory. While your knight is the star athlete on the field, you're his caddy, his pit crew, and his paramedic, all rolled into one. You stand at the edge of the lists, your arms full of spare lances. When he shatters one, you run out to provide another. If his horse is injured or he is knocked to the ground, a frequent and incredibly dangerous occurrence, it's your job to sprint into the chaos. You have to control the panicked, multi-ton warhorse while simultaneously helping your master, who is essentially a turtle stuck on his back, to his feet. You might have to drag him to the relative safety of the sidelines. It is terrifying, high-stakes work, and your only reward is that your knight gets to continue. Through all this, a unique relationship forms between you and your master. Historians still argue whether the bond between a knight and his squire was typically one of a harsh taskmaster and his underling, or if it more closely resembled a true mentorship. The reality, as you're discovering, is complicated. Some days, he is a patient teacher, correcting your grip on a sword or explaining the subtle shifts in a horse's temperament. Other days, frustrated by a poor showing in the yard, he is a torrent of angry criticism. He is your boss, your teacher, your protector, and your warden. You see him in his moments of triumph and in his moments of weakness, and you learn to anticipate his every need. You're becoming indispensable, not just a servant, but a trusted right hand. But as you collapse onto your straw pallet at night, every muscle aching, the smell of horse sweat and metal polish clinging to you like a second skin, the dream of knighthood feels less like an honor and more like just the next stage of unending, back-breaking labor. Years you have spent as another man's shadow, learning the brutal poetry of horse and steel. You have hauled, cleaned, polished, and run until your body was a single, unified ache. You've survived the petty tyrannies of the tilt yard and the controlled chaos of the tournament. Perhaps you even stood your ground in a real skirmish, proving you wouldn't bolt at the first sight of danger. And now, the day has come. Your knight, your master, has looked at you and seen not a boy, but a man ready to carry his own shield. He has declared you worthy. You are to be made a knight. The endless, grimy apprenticeship you began as a teen is finally over. But before you can receive the accolades and the title, there is one final, bizarre, and agonizing hurdle to overcome. Your journey into knighthood begins not with a sword, but with a bathtub. This in itself is a momentous occasion. As we've discussed, full-body baths are a luxury, a complicated affair reserved for the very wealthy or the very dirty. This, however, is a ritual bath, and it is mandatory. You are ceremonially scrubbed clean, an act meant to symbolize the washing away of your past sins and your purification for the sacred office you are about to enter. For you, it's probably just nice to get the years of accumulated grime from scouring armor out from under your fingernails. After the bath, you are dressed in a series of symbolic garments. First, a simple white tunic, representing the purity you are expected to maintain. Over this, a rich red robe is placed, a stark reminder of the blood you must be willing to shed in service to your Lord and to God. Finally, a black coat is added, symbolizing your acceptance of death. It's a rather grim dress code for what's supposed to be a promotion. Clean and dressed like a walking embodiment of a life insurance policy, you are led at dusk to the castle chapel. The air inside is cold and heavy with the scent of damp stone and faint, lingering incense. The great wooden doors boom shut behind you. leaving you in a silence broken only by the whisper of your own breathing. At the far end of the chapel, the altar is lit by a single, tall candle on either side, and laid out upon the altar, gleaming in the flickering light, is your prize. It is a full suit of armor, brand new and polished to a mirror shine. Your helmet, your gauntlets, your sword, everything you have ever worked for is right there, almost close enough to touch. Your instructions are simple. You are to spend the entire night here, alone, in a vigil. You must kneel on the cold stone floor, contemplating this armor and the sacred vows you are about to take. You cannot sit. You cannot sleep. You must pray until dawn. The first hour is almost noble. You are filled with a sense of purpose. You kneel. You gaze at the magnificent steel, and you try to feel pious. You think about the code of chivalry, about protecting the weak and serving your liege. Then the second hour begins. The cold from the stone floor has seeped through your thin leather shoes and is crawling up your legs. A dull ache begins in your knees. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach from the day's mandatory fast becomes a persistent, distracting growl. Your attempts at prayer become less about piety and more about begging for time to speed up. The third hour is misery. The fourth is a special kind of agony. Your back spasms, your knees are screaming, and your eyelids feel like they have tiny weights attached to them. This is the great, solemn vigil of the night to be, and it is, frankly, a masterclass in sanctioned torment. You are supposed to be having a profound spiritual awakening, preparing your soul for the burdens of knighthood. But what are you really thinking about? Not the plight of the poor, but the roast boar you hope is served at the feast tomorrow. Not the intricacies of divine justice, but whether that flicker of movement in the corner was a rat. Historians still argue whether these kinds of rituals were, for the medieval man, a genuinely transformative spiritual experience, or if they were simply a deeply ingrained tradition, a final, painful hazing ritual that you just had to get through. Was your mind truly on God, or were you just trying to figure out a way to shift your weight without the floorboards creaking? The long, silent hours stretch into an eternity. The candlelight plays tricks on your tired eyes, making the shadows in the corners of the chapel twist and dance. The polished surface of the helmet on the altar seems to morph into a strange, distorted face. Every distant sound from the courtyard, the changing of the guard, the bark of a dog, is magnified, a brief interruption in the oppressive silence that only serves to make it feel deeper when it returns. This is a test, but it is not a test of your strength or your skill with a sword. It is a test of pure endurance. It is the final distillation of all your training as a page and a squire. Can you suffer in silence? Can you follow a command, no matter how uncomfortable, how nonsensical it seems? Can you hold a painful pose for 8 hours straight? Congratulations, you have all the qualifications of a knight, or perhaps a garden gnome. Just when you think you can't possibly kneel for one more second, that your spirit or your kneecaps will surely break, you notice a change. A faint, gray light begins to filter through the high, narrow window of the chapel. It is the dawn. You have made it. As the light grows, the chapel loses its terrifying, shadowy mystery and becomes just a cold, stone room again. Soon, the heavy doors will open. Your master and other knights will enter to collect you. You will be so stiff you can barely stand, so tired you can barely think, and so hungry you could eat the altar cloth. But you have passed the vigil. You have earned the right to wear the armor you've been staring at all night. The misery is over. Or, more accurately, it's about to change into a much heavier, more metallic form of misery. You stumble out of the chapel, blinking in the morning light, a creature of cold, stiff limbs and profound hunger. Your night of miserable prayer is over, and your reward is immediate. You are brought before your Lord, the man you once served as a page, and instructed to kneel one last time as a squire. After years of service, after that final, agonizing vigil, this part is surprisingly brief. You recite your oaths, to be brave, to be loyal, to defend the church, to protect the downtrodden. The words you contemplated in the dark now spoken aloud in the clear light of day. Then your Lord takes your own sword, the one that lay on the altar with your armor, and gives you a light tap on the shoulder or neck. This is the accolade, the official moment of creation. In some cases, this light tap was more of a hearty thwack, a final reminder that this new life you're entering is one of pain. And just like that, it's done. You are Surya. Arise. The first perk of your new status is that you are no longer the one doing the grunt work. A young page, barely a teenager, is assigned to you as your own squire. He looks at you with a wide-eyed terror that is deeply familiar. You see your former self in him, and it is a strange feeling to be on this side of the equation. It is his job now to handle the stables, the errands, and most importantly, the armor. And your first act as a knight is to stand there and let him dress you, a task you yourself performed for your master countless times. You have spent your entire life working to get into this suit of steel. You are about to discover that it's less like putting on a uniform and more like being painstakingly assembled. The process begins not with steel, but with cloth. Your squire helps you into a thick, padded garment called a gambeson or an arming doublet. This isn't just a shirt, it's a crucial and surprisingly complex piece of medieval sportswear. It's heavily padded in the shoulders and hips to cushion the weight of the armor, but thinner in the joints to allow for movement. And all over it, you see dozens of tough little leather laces or fabric ties dangling. These are arming points, and they are the secret to the entire system. Your 60 pounds of plate armor won't be held on by a few big straps, but tied directly to this undergarment, piece by piece, to distribute the load. Without this padded, lace-covered onesie, your armor would be an unwearable heap of sliding, clanking metal. Now the construction begins, from the ground up. You sit on a stool as your squire kneels at your feet. He hands you the sabotats, articulated steel shoes that you slip on over your leather boots. Then come the greaves, the curved plates that protect your shins, followed by the hinged polions for your knees and the cuisses that cover your thighs. Each piece is meticulously buckled and then tied with leather thongs to the arming points on your leggings. The weight starts to build, a strange, creeping heaviness that anchors you to the floor. To cover the vulnerable spots at your joints, the back of the knee, the groin, you wear pieces of chainmail called voiders or a mail skirt. The constant chafe of metal on metal and metal on leather begins. Next comes the torso. Your squire and perhaps another servant hold up the heavy, sculpted breastplate. You exhale as they position it and pull the thick leather straps around your back, buckling them tight. A matching back blade is added. Suddenly, your breathing feels constricted. The steel cage presses in on you, solid and unyielding. The freedom of movement you took for granted just minutes ago is gone. Then come the arms, the great, wing-like pauldrons for the shoulders, The rear braces for the upper arm, vam braces for the forearm, and cooters for the elbows, all intricately articulated and strapped into place. Historians still argue whether the relentless 15th century march toward full-plate armor was a defensive reaction to deadlier weapons like the longbow, or if it was an offensive innovation, creating an unstoppable, heavily armored cavalryman for the charge. Standing here, feeling more like a statue than a soldier, you suspect it's a bit of both. Finally, the gauntlets. These are masterpieces of metalworking, gloves of steel with dozens of tiny, articulated plates that allow your fingers to move. You flex your hands, hearing a symphony of tiny metallic clicks and scrapes. Your entire body, from neck to toe, is now encased in a shell of customized steel. You stand up, a slow, deliberate movement. The total weight is immense, at least 60 pounds, but thanks to the clever distribution via the arming points, it's bearable. You are a walking fortress. You are also incredibly clumsy. The last piece of the puzzle is the helmet. Before your squire lowers it over your head, you take one last look around the room with unobstructed vision, one last deep breath of open air. Then, down it comes. The world vanishes, replaced by a dark, claustrophobic cavern of steel. Your vision is now a narrow horizontal slit, a letterbox view of the world. All peripheral sight is gone. Your hearing is muffled, the sounds of the room replaced by the hollow echo of your own breathing, which quickly begins to fob the inside of your visor. The smell is a mixture of oiled steel and your own recycled air. You are now sealed inside your metal coffin. You have arrived. You have achieved the dream. You are a knight in shining armor. And it feels suspiciously like being trapped. You spent more than a decade of your life trying to get into this suit, and your first thought as a full-fledged knight is, how on earth do I get out? You are in. The helmet is on, the world has shrunk to a tiny slit, and you have officially become a human-shaped tank. That feeling of being trapped, what you noted at the end of your assembly in what we are now calling your metal coffin, does not subside. It intensifies. Your squire takes a respectful step back, and you take your first official stride as a knight. The sound is astonishing. It's not a noble clank, but a cacophony, a grating symphony of scraping plates, creaking leather, and jingling mail that announces your every move. You feel less like a swift predator and more like a walking kitchen that has fallen down a flight of stairs. The romantic image of the silent, deadly night evaporates in the sheer noise of your own existence. Your senses are under assault by way of total deprivation. Your vision is the most immediate and shocking change. Forget a 360-degree view of your surroundings. You now have about a 90-degree horizontal slit to see through, with absolutely no peripheral vision. To look at something to your left, you cannot simply turn your head. Your helmet is strapped on tight. You must turn your entire upper body in a slow, deliberate pivot. The battlefield, or even just the room you're in, is no longer a space you inhabit, but a series of still images you have to consciously scan for. Your hearing is just as compromised. The world outside is muffled, indistinct, buried under the booming echo of your own breath inside the helmet and the constant soundtrack of your metallic body. You are isolated in a world of your own noise. Now, let's address a common myth. You are not completely helpless. The idea that a knight who fell on his back was as helpless as an overturned beetle, needing a crane to be winched back onto his horse, is largely an exaggeration. A well-made suit of armor, fitted to its wearer, allowed for a surprising degree of movement. A fit man could stand up from the ground, walk, jog a short distance, and certainly mount his horse. But the myth exists for a reason. While these movements are possible, they come at an enormous cost in energy. Every single action, taking a step, raising your arm, getting to your knees, requires you to fight against the inertia and sheer bulk of 60 pounds of steel. It's like performing your entire daily routine while wearing a weighted vest that's as awkward as it is heavy. You can do it, but you will be utterly exhausted in a fraction of the time. Simple actions become Herculean tasks. You drop a gauntlet. To pick it up, you must perform a slow, careful squat, concentrating on your balance so you don't topple over. Your movements are robotic and deliberate. Sitting down is a controlled fall onto a sturdy chair, hopefully positioned correctly by your long-suffering squire. Inside the steel shell, you begin to heat up. The armor creates a personal greenhouse effect. There is no ventilation. The thick, padded gambeson beneath the steel soaks up your sweat, and within minutes, you are uncomfortably hot, a sensation that will only grow worse with any physical exertion. Dehydration is no longer a risk associated with a desert march. It's a standard feature of your work uniform. And then there are the more delicate, biological realities that the epic poems tend to leave out. You are fully armed, celebrating your new knighthood, and you suddenly feel a familiar, urgent call of nature. What do? The answer is both simple and horrifying. Nothing. You do nothing. There are no zippers, no convenient flaps. Your armor is a holistic, overlapping system designed to keep sharp things out, which means there is no easy way to let anything else out, either. Relieving yourself requires a full-scale disassembly. You would need your squire, a quiet corner, and a good 20 minutes to unbuckle and remove the leg armor, only to have to put it all back on again. The day-to-day reality of being a knight involves a lot of strategic dehydration and learning to ignore your body's most basic signals. It's a glamorous life. This constant state of discomfort, the heat, the weight, the claustrophobia, has a profound psychological impact. Historians still argue whether the undeniable protective benefit of full-plate armor was sometimes offset by the sheer fatigue and sensory isolation it imposed on the wearer. Over the course of a long battle, does the exhausted, half-deaf, tunnel-vision man inside the steel suit make poorer decisions? Does he become slower, less aware, and more vulnerable to a clever, unencumbered opponent? Your armor is your greatest asset, but it is also a prison that dulls your senses and saps your will. You are a mighty fortress, but the man inside the walls is getting very, very tired. The final test of your new, clumsy reality is the horse. Your squire leads your destrier over, the powerful animal you once cared for with such diligence. Now you must mount it. You can't just gracefully swing a leg over the saddle. You place your steel-cased foot in the stirrup, grab the pommel of the saddle with your gauntlet hands, and haul. It is an awkward, straining heave, lifting your own body weight plus the 60 pounds of metal encasing it. For a moment, you hang there, a graceless bundle of steel, before you manage to pull yourself up and settle into the high-backed war saddle. You made it. You are armed. You are mounted. You are the very picture of chivalric power. But you feel less like a warrior and more like a fragile parcel, carefully loaded and ready to be shipped to wherever the fighting is. You are powerful, protected, and more helpless than you have ever been in your life. You are seated. You have survived the awkward, straining heave into the saddle, and now you are perched atop your destrier, your war horse. The world looks different from up here, higher than you're used to, and the feeling of claustrophobia from your armor, is now joined by a new, more primal sensation: power. It is not your power. It is the raw, immense, and barely contained energy of the animal beneath you. This is not a placid, gentle trail horse. This is a destrier, and you remember from your time as a squire that its default mood is somewhere between professionally angry and actively looking for a fight. Forget this cinematic fantasy of a noble steed that is your best friend. This animal is a highly trained, incredibly expensive, and dangerously aggressive piece of military hardware. What exactly is this creature you're riding? The truth is, historians still argue whether the legendary destrier was a specific, massive breed, a great horse, like a modern shire, as was once thought, or if the term simply referred to any high-quality stallion suited for war, its size and build varying by region. What you know for sure is that this animal is a giant. Its back is broad, its neck is a column of muscle, and it stands a good hand or two taller than any normal riding horse. It's almost certainly a stallion, as their natural aggression was encouraged and honed for the battlefield. This creature has been bred for centuries for one purpose: to be a living, breathing battering ram. Its value is astronomical. A single, proven destrier could cost the equivalent of a small estate, or the entire lifetime wages of a master craftsman. This horse is likely worth more than the collective net worth of the entire village you just passed. This is why you spent so much of your youth, as a squire, tending to its every need. Losing this horse in battle isn't just an inconvenience, it's a financial catastrophe. To help you control this four-legged fortune, you are wedged into a specialized war saddle. It's less a seat and more a docking station for a knight. The front pommel is high and pronounced, and the back, the cantle, rises up steeply behind you. This design isn't for comfort. It's engineered to lock you in place, to absorb the devastating impact of a lance strike, and keep you from being blasted out of the saddle like a cork from a bottle. It is, in essence, a medieval seatbelt. The downside of this excellent safety feature is that it also makes a quick, voluntary dismount nearly impossible. Once you are in, you are in. You are quite literally strapped to a 1,000-pound beast with a bad attitude. Now try to ride it. In your clumsy, 60-pound suit of steel, this is a challenge. Your hands, encased in articulated gauntlets, struggle to feel the thick leather reins. You can't just give a gentle nudge with your heels. You have to issue commands with stiff, armored legs. Fortunately, the horse is trained to respond to neck reining and broad shifts in your weight, but your ability to provide those subtle cues is severely hampered. It's like trying to type an email while wearing oven mitts. You are the pilot, but the control panel is sluggish and unresponsive. The horse, impatient and bred for action, shifts and stamps beneath you, snorting clouds of hot air. It wants to go. Its training is all about forward momentum and aggression. Your job is to hold that energy in check until the perfect, violent moment. This is because the horse is not just your transport. It is your primary partner in combat. It has been trained to be terrifying. It will charge headlong into a line of infantry, undeterred by the sight of spears. It has been taught to bite, to kick, and to trample any man who gets in its way. Its role is to add its own considerable weight and fury to your attack. You are not a lone rider. You are the guiding intelligence of a horse in human weapon system. This creature is less My Little Pony and more of a furry, four-legged tank that runs on oats and fury. And because this animal is so valuable and so effective, it is also a massive target. A particularly nasty but effective battlefield tactic was called laming, deliberately injuring an enemy's horse. An unhorsed knight, trapped in his heavy armor on the ground, was a far easier target. Besides, killing the knight got you honor, but capturing his priceless horse got you paid. To protect this investment, the horse itself often wears armor, called barding, a steel plate. The chanfron protects its face, sometimes with its own menacing spikes. A criniere of overlapping plates guards its neck, and a large pectoral covers its chest. This doesn't make the horse invincible, but it does make an already intimidating creature look like something that has just galloped out of a nightmare. As you sit there, encased in your own steel, atop your partially armored steed, the full picture comes into focus. You are not a man on a horse. You are the commander of a mobile weapons platform. Your survival and your success are now completely entwined with the health, stamina, and battle-crazed training of this magnificent, terrifying animal. You have reached the pinnacle of medieval warfare, and it requires you to place your complete trust in a creature whose mind you can never truly know, and whose raw power you can only hope to aim in the right direction. Perched atop your belligerent, high-value warhorse, you are finally ready to practice your craft. Your squire, with a grunt of effort, hands you your first tool, the lance. It's a 12-foot pole of solid ash, tipped with a blunted steel coronal for practice. Your destination is the tilt yard, a familiar patch of ground where you spent countless hours as a squire, dutifully holding shields and running errands. The irony is thick enough to taste through your visor. You are now the one doing the charging, and some other poor boy is standing well clear, hoping you know what you're doing. You probably don't. Not really. Not yet. Your main training partner is the Quinton. You remember this device from your youth, a rotating arm on a post with a shield on one end and a weighted bag on the other. The goal is simple: ride at it, full tilt, and strike the shield squarely with your lance. The trick is that upon impact, the whole arm pivots. If you are too slow, too clumsy, or your strike is off-center, the weighted bag will swing around and deliver a punishing blow to the back of your head. It is a simple, elegant, and deeply humiliating teaching tool. You signal to your horse. The massive animal surges forward, a wave of muscle and momentum. You try to remember everything, keep your seat locked in the war saddle, couch the heavy lance under your arm, breathe, and aim, all while peering through the mail slot of your helmet, trying to guide a 1,000-pound animal and a 12-foot pole toward a small wooden target. The world becomes a jarring, thundering rush. The impact, when it comes, is a violent shock that travels from the lance tip, up your arm, and through your entire body. A direct hit sends the shield spinning, and a satisfying thwack echoes across the yard. A poor hit results in the sickening splinter of your lance tip, and, if you're unlucky, the follow-up thump of the counterweight against your helmet, a sound that rings through your head like a church bell. You do this again, and again, and again. Your arm aches, your horse is annoyed, and you have a growing collection of expensive, splintered lances. After you've mastered, or at least survived, the lance, you move on to the real workhorse of knightly combat, the sword. You go through the awkward process of dismounting, and your squire hands you your arming sword or longsword. Now, forget everything you've seen in movies. There are no balletic spins, no witty banter, no leaping onto tables. Cinematic sword fighting is a dance. This is brutal, exhausting work. A steel longsword is a heavy, cumbersome weapon, and you are wearing 60 pounds of armor that restricts your every move. Your training consists of endless, repetitive drills, practicing a series of guards, cuts, and thrusts against a wooden post called a pell. Your muscles burn, sweat pours down your face inside your helmet, and the elegant art of swordsmanship reveals itself to be mostly about grunting, sweating, and hitting a piece of wood very, very hard. The most important lesson you learn is that against another man in full plate, the razor-sharp edge of your sword is almost useless. Hacking away at a steel breastplate will do little more than dull your blade and tire your arm. You have to use the point. And this is where you learn a wonderfully counterintuitive and effective technique preserved in the historical fight manuals. It's called the half-sword. You grip your sword's blade with your gauntlet left hand, halfway up the steel, effectively turning your long sword into a short spear. This gives you far greater leverage and point control, allowing you to use the tip like a can opener to pry into the weak points of your opponent's armor, the joints of the elbows, the armpits, the groin, the narrow slits of the visor. It looks strange, but it is the deadly reality of steel-on-steel combat. But what if you can't find a gap? For that, you have other, less refined tools. Your squire brings you a mace. It is a deceptively simple weapon, a short, heavy club with a flanged head of solid steel. There is no art here, no subtle technique. The mace is designed for one thing: blunt force trauma. You practice swinging it against dented, discarded helmets set up on posts. A sword might glance off a helmet, a mace crushes it. It doesn't need to pierce the armor. It just needs to transfer enough kinetic energy through the steel to break the bone or concuss the brain underneath. It is a savage, brutal weapon, and wielding it feels less like fencing and more like demolition work. It's the medieval equivalent of deciding that the argument is over, and now it's time to hit things with a hammer. All of this endless, painful practice raises a question. Is this for war, or is it for sport? You apply these skills in battle, of course, but you use them far more often in the tournament. And historians still argue whether the tournament, by your era, was primarily a form of military training or if it had become a professionalized spectacle, a kind of medieval Super Bowl with its own specialized, heavier armor and blunted weapons. Were you training for the chaos of the battlefield, or for the controlled environment of the lists? The lines are blurry. What is not blurry is the exhaustion that sinks into your bones at the end of each day. You have spent hours swinging heavy objects, being jolted by impacts, and sweating inside your personal steel oven. The path of the warrior, you are learning, is paved with splinters, bruises, and the profound, monotonous ache of endless repetition. The day's brutal training is finally over. Every muscle in your body hums with a deep, profound ache, a testament to hours spent swinging heavy steel and being jolted by the impact of the lance. You are bruised, exhausted, and ravenously hungry. The very thought of food is a beacon of hope. After going through the tedious, reverse-order process of being disassembled from your armor, you make your way to the great hall, your stomach rumbling with visions of a hero's feast. You picture roasted chickens, huge sides of beef, mountains of bread, and overflowing flagons of wine. This, you feel, is the reward you have earned. This is the fuel a warrior requires. You push open the heavy oak doors to the hall, the same smoky, crowded, and dimly lit room you grew up in. The long trestle tables are laid out, and the benches are rapidly filling with the other knights, squires, and members of the household. The smell that hits you is not of roasting meat and fine spices. It's the familiar, underwhelming scent of boiling cabbage and wet dogs. You realize, with a sinking feeling in your gut, that the grand feasts you dreamed of are reserved for very special occasions. This is just another Tuesday, and on Tuesdays, you get the standard fare. The dream of the banquet evaporates like mist, replaced by the grim reality of your daily diet. Your plate is the first sign that this will not be a fine dining experience. You don't get one. Instead, a servant places before you a trencher. This is a thick, square slab of stale, coarse bread, usually made from rye or barley. This is your dish, your bowl, and your napkin, all in one. It's a wonderfully practical and entirely unappetizing piece of dinnerware, designed to soak up the juices of whatever is slopped onto it. The main course, arriving in a massive steaming cauldron, is pottage. This is the cornerstone of your diet, the fuel that runs the entire castle. It's a thick, gloopy, perpetual stew of boiled grains, oats, barley, wheat, mixed with whatever vegetables are on hand. Today, it's mostly cabbage and onions, with a few sad-looking peas floating in the murky broth. If you're lucky, there might be some scraps of bacon or sinewy beef boiled in for a hint of flavor. It is hot, it is filling, and it is profoundly, soul-crushingly monotonous. You will eat some variation of this pottage almost every single day. The menu's variety is a masterclass in subtlety. Sometimes the cabbage is more prominent. Other days, the onion really shines. When meat does make an appearance, it's rarely the succulent roast you imagined. Fresh meat is a luxury and spoils quickly. Most of what you eat is preserved in the only way they know how, salt. Barrels of salted pork and beef fill the storerooms, and the resulting meat is tough, stringy, and incredibly salty. Another option is tough, boiled mutton from a sheep that was past its prime for producing wool. To make this less than appetizing fare palatable, you rely on spices, but not just for flavor. Expensive spices like black pepper, cloves, or nutmeg are a huge status symbol, but they also serve a more practical purpose. They are masters of disguise, expertly masking the taste of meat that is beginning to turn. Is that a complex, peppery flavor, or are you tasting the first hints of decay? It's a fun little game you get to play at every meal. To wash this all down, you have a tankard of ale. Not the rich, hoppy craft ale of the modern world, but small beer. Water from the castle well is often untrustworthy and can be a source of sickness, so from childhood, you have drunk ale with every meal. This small beer has a very low alcohol content, so you're not getting roaringly drunk at lunch. It's brewed to be a safe, relatively clean source of hydration and calories. Historians still argue whether this constant consumption of ale was a net positive, providing liquid bread and safe fluids, or if it contributed to chronic health issues. What you know is that it's watery, often sour, and tastes vaguely of bread. It is, technically, a liquid, and that's the best you can say for it. You eat with the tools you have. A spoon, if you're given one, and the dagger at your belt. You scoop the pottage from your trencher, using a hunk of slightly less stale bread to mop up the juices. The atmosphere is loud and boisterous. Bones are gnawed clean and tossed onto the rush-covered floor for the hounds that weave between the benches. People reach across each other, sharing bowls and conversation. It's a communal, messy, and efficient refueling stop. At the end of the meal, what do you do with your gravy-soaked bread plate? You eat it, if you're still hungry enough. More often, the sodden trenchers are collected and given as alms to the poor waiting at the castle gate, or simply fed to the dogs. Your plate is a charitable donation. You lean back on the bench, your hunger sated, but your spirit unsatisfied. This is the fuel you are given. This bland, heavy, repetitive diet is what powers your grueling training sessions and is meant to sustain you in battle. The romantic image of the nightly feast, with its wine and song and roasted swan, is a beautiful lie. The truth is a stomach full of grit, grease, and gruel. It is sustenance, but it is not a pleasure. You go to bed not feeling rewarded, but simply refueled, like a cart that has been loaded with stones for the next day's haul. With a stomach full of pottage and weak ale, you push back from the bench and leave the noise of the great hall behind. Your day of labor is done, and all you want is the quiet comfort of your bed. But as you move through the winding corridors and spiral staircases of your fortress home, you are reminded that comfort is a concept that does not live here. This castle is not a palace. It is a machine built for war, and you are just one of the many cogs living deep within its cold, stone guts. The first thing that hits you when you leave the immediate vicinity of the great hall's roaring fire is the cold. It is a deep, penetrating chill that radiates from the massive stone walls. These walls, several feet thick, are brilliant at stopping a catapult stone, but they are also magnificent at absorbing and holding the cold. They are giant, unmoving blocks of ice that ensure the castle's interior is perpetually damp and chilly, even at the height of summer. The only real source of warmth is a fire, and the central heating system is simply you walking closer to one. You see rich tapestries hanging on the walls of the more important chambers. You once thought they were purely for decoration, depicting grand haunts or biblical scenes. You now understand their true purpose. They are a desperate, and mostly futile, attempt to put a layer of wool between the inhabitants and the ever-present, seeping cold of the stone. The second thing you notice is the darkness. The corridors are a labyrinth of shadows. Windows, where they exist at all, are not grand panes of glass. They are narrow vertical slits known as arrow loops, designed for an archer to shoot out of, not for sunlight to pour in. They offer a sliver of a view and a sliver of light. At night, the only illumination comes from torches stuck in iron sconces, which sputter, hiss, and coat the ceiling in a layer of greasy black soot, or from precious, expensive candles. For the most part, you move through a world of deep, impenetrable shadows, your footsteps echoing in the gloom. It is a place of unseen corners and things that scuttle away just beyond the reach of the light. This dark, cold space is also incredibly crowded. The romantic image of a castle is one of vast, echoing, empty halls. The reality is that your home is a vertical village, teeming with life. You are never, ever alone. Every corridor has servants rushing past on errands, men-at-arms dicing in a corner, squires whispering gossip, and children and dogs darting underfoot. The air is a constant hum of activity and noise. Privacy is the ultimate luxury, a concept so foreign that there's barely a word for it. This is where you encounter the scholarly debate in its most tangible form. Historians argue whether medieval people, raised in this communal environment, even had a concept of privacy as we know it, or if they found comfort and security in the constant presence of others. Did you yearn for solitude, or was being alone a terrifying state of vulnerability? Your search for a moment of peace leads you to one of the few places a person could be briefly alone: the garderobe. This is the castle's toilet, and it is a masterpiece of grimly functional engineering. It is a small room, or sometimes just a stone seat, built into the thickness of the outer wall. The hole in the seat opens into a chute that drops straight down the face of the castle, emptying into the moat, or a cesspit below. It is cold, drafty, and smells exactly as you would expect. And here we find a wonderfully strange historical tidbit. The name garderobe is the root of our modern word wardrobe. It's believed that lords would hang their expensive woolen and velvet cloaks in the toilet shaft, as the pungent ammonia fumes rising from the waist below were a highly effective deterrent against moths and fleas. Your toilet is also a closet. It's a multitasking feature that you'd rather not think about too deeply. As you sit there, on a cold stone seat with a draft chilling your backside, you realize this is the closest you might get to a private office. This lack of personal space is the defining feature of your life. You sleep not in your own room, but in a shared chamber with other knights and squires of the household. Your bed is a straw-stuffed pallet on the floor, possibly shared with another man, and almost certainly teeming with insect life. The nightly soundtrack is a symphony of snores, coughs, and the rustling of sleepless bodies. The lord and his lady might have their own private chamber, the solar, but for everyone else, life is lived out in the open, in full view of dozens of other people. You are living in a fortress, and every architectural choice reflects that. The spiral staircases are narrow and always turn clockwise as they go up, designed to give a right-handed swordsman defending from above the advantage over an attacker coming up. The entrances have murder holes, gatehouses, and drawbridges. Everything is about security. Everything is about defense. Comfort, light, warmth, and privacy were afterthoughts, if they were thoughts at all. You are safer in here from an outside army than almost anyone else in the kingdom. But you have traded that safety for a life of constant, grinding, low-level discomfort. It is a cold, dark, noisy, and crowded existence. And as you finally find your straw mattress in the corner of a shared room, you pull your scratchy wool blanket up and resign yourself to another night with no peace and no quiet. The dull, monotonous routine of your life in the cold, crowded castle is suddenly shattered by news. A great tournament is to be held. The lord you serve is attending, and so are you. This is it. This is the chance to put your endless, painful training to the test, to gain honor, and to make a name for yourself. A wave of excitement ripples through the household. The squires are frantic, polishing armor to an impossible shine. The grooms fuss over the destriers. For you, it's a mixture of gut-wrenching fear and eager anticipation. You remember watching these events from the sidelines as a boy, a spectacle of color and violence. Now, you are no longer a spectator. You are part of the show. You arrive at the tournament grounds, and it feels like a different world. It's a riot of sound and color, a medieval fairground built around a field of glorious, sanctioned violets. Colorful pavilions and tents, the landscape, each flying the proud banner of a noble house. The air is thick with the smell of horse sweat, roasting food, and the nervous energy of hundreds of people. Trumpets blare, announcing the arrival of contestants. The common folk, a roaring, cheering mass, press against the barriers of the lists, the long, fenced-off lane where the jousting will take place. For them, this is the greatest entertainment imaginable. For you, it's your final exam, and it's a pass/fail. You are armed, mounted, and led to one end of the lists. Your squire hands you a heavy tournament lance, thicker and more solid than a war lance, and tipped with a three-pronged steel coronal designed to grip a shield rather than pierce it. They are laughably called lances of peace, a bit of friendly branding for what is essentially a battering ram. At the far end of the field, you see your opponent, another knight, a faceless monolith of steel, preparing his own charge. This isn't the Quentin. This target is armed, armored, and moving towards you with the express purpose of knocking you from your horse. The roar of the crowd sounds less like encouragement and more like the hungry cry of a mob that wants to see someone fall down. The rules are explained, a strange and specific calculus of violence. This is where you encounter the quirky, sporting side of combat. You get 1 point for breaking your lance cleanly between your opponent's waist and neck. You get more points for a headshot that shatters the lance. And you get the most points, and all the glory, for an addant, a strike so powerful that it unhorses your opponent completely. The goal is to score points, not necessarily to injure, but physics doesn't really care about your intentions. The trumpet sounds. You spur your destrier forward. The ground trembles as the two of you charge, two freight trains of man, horse, and steel, hurtling toward a head-on collision. The world narrows to the approaching figure in your visor. You aim, you brace, and then comes the impact. It is a cataclysmic, deafening explosion of splintering wood and screeching metal. The force is unimaginable, a solid wall of kinetic energy that slams into you, threatening to tear you from the saddle despite its high walls. If your aim is true, your lance shatters, you score your points, and you wheel your horse around for the next pass, your arm and shoulder screaming in protest. If your aim is poor, or your opponent's is better, you might find yourself flying through the air, 60 pounds of steel doing nothing to soften the landing as you crash to the earth. But the joust is only one part of the tournament. The main event, especially in earlier periods, was the melee. This was not an elegant one-on-one duel. It was a mass team battle that was often indistinguishable from real war. Two teams of knights would line up at opposite ends of a huge field and simply charge. It was a chaotic, swirling brawl of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of men. You use blunted swords and maces, but the danger is immense. Horses trip and fall, men are trampled, and the sheer force of a mace blow can break bones and crush helmets, blunted or not. The church repeatedly tried to ban tournaments, viewing them as dens of vanity and deadly sin, but they were simply too popular to stop. In the chaos of the melee, the true purpose of the tournament becomes clear, and it's a subject historians still debate. Was this all for honor, a way to keep your martial skills sharp for war? Or was it, for many knights, a brutal and fiercely competitive business enterprise? The answer is both. The goal in the melee is to capture your opponents. A defeated knight must surrender his horse, his armor, and his weapons, a fortune, remember, are now the property of his captor. To get them back, he must pay a handsome ransom. For a wealthy lord, it's a thrilling game. For a land-poor knight like yourself, this is your livelihood. A good day could see you leaving with 2 fine war horses and a purse heavy with silver. A bad day could see you lose everything you own, leaving you in ruinous debt. You are not just fighting for glory, you are gambling with your entire net worth. The day ends. The field is a wreck of splintered lances and discarded banners. The cheers of the crowd have faded, replaced by the groans of injured men being carried back to their tents by their squires. You see a knight with his arms set in a crude splint, another being helped away, clearly concussed. You might be victorious, flush with winnings and pride. Or you might be one of the losers, facing not only the physical pain of defeat, but the humiliation and financial disaster that comes with it. The glorious tournament, you now understand, is a beautiful, brutal, high-stakes spectacle of pain, where the only prize for second place is a long, uncomfortable ride home. Whether you left the tournament field victorious or vanquished, you return to the familiar cold of your castle home with more than just bruises or prize money. You carry with you a head full of confusing contradictions. In the joust, you saluted your opponent with your lance, a sign of respect, moments before trying to slam him into the ground with enough force to break his bones. In the melee, you fought alongside your teammates with fierce loyalty, all while looking for a wealthy opponent to capture for a tidy profit. You are praised for your courage and skill, your prowess, but the entire spectacle was a brutal, chaotic affair that felt less like a noble pursuit and more like a violent business venture. This is your formal introduction to the glorious, celebrated, and deeply hypocritical code of chivalry. At your knighting ceremony, you swore a series of sacred oaths. You remember them well: to be brave, to be loyal, to defend the church, to protect the wake. This is the bedrock of chivalry, the moral compass that is supposed to guide your every action. The problem is, you're quickly discovering that this compass spins wildly depending on which way the wind is blowing. Chivalry, you learn, is not a single, unified rulebook. There is no master text you can consult. It is a floating, ever-changing set of aristocratic ideals, a sort of gentleman's agreement for the European warrior class, and it is riddled with convenient exceptions and fine print. Some parts of the code are easy. Loyalty to your lord, for example. This is your primary job description. Your lord provides you with food, shelter, and purpose. You provide him with your sword arm. It's a straightforward feudal contract. Courage in battle is another. Your entire life, from your first wrestling matches as a page to your grueling drills with the mace, has been about cultivating a capacity for violence and a tolerance for fear. These are the professional virtues of your class, and they are non-negotiable. But then you get to the fuzzier tenets. Take, for instance, the noble vow to protect the weak. It sounds wonderful, the very essence of a heroic knight. But you soon learn that the definition of weak is surprisingly narrow. Does it apply to the peasant family whose field you are currently trampling through with your warhorse on the way to a campaign? No. They are part of the landscape. Does it apply to the merchant whose goods you are seizing because he was late on a tax payment to your lord? Unlikely. The weak, the code generally refers to our other members of the noble class, specifically high-born women and children, and the clergy. Protecting the weak is a vital duty, but it seems to apply mostly to people who already have a fair bit of status. It's less about universal justice and more about professional courtesy within your own social club. This is where you begin to stumble into a major debate that historians still grapple with. What was the true purpose of chivalry? Was it a genuine moral framework? A real attempt to tame the violent instincts of a warrior aristocracy and civilize them? Or was it something more cynical, a brilliant piece of class-based marketing? Was the entire code of honor and piety an elaborate justification for your social position, a way to distinguish you, the noble warrior, from a common foot soldier or a mercenary who might be just as brave but lacks your virtue? By wrapping your violence in a cloak of honor and divine purpose, you aren't just a killer, you are an instrument of God's will. It's a very effective way to legitimize your power. And then there are the truly bizarre subclauses of the code, none more strange than the concept of courtly love. This is a highly theatrical and literary game of romance, and you are expected to play along. You must choose a noble lady, who is almost always married to someone else, and make her the object of your undying, platonic devotion. You wear her token, a sleeve or a ribbon, and to a tournament, you write her painfully earnest poetry, and you perform great deeds in her name, all without any expectation of physical reward. It is a passionate but chaste affair, a sort of spiritual infidelity that was considered ennobling. This, you find, is a very strange hobby for a man whose daily life involves mud, sweat, and hitting things with a club. It also stands in stark contrast to your own future marriage, which will likely have nothing to do with love and everything to do with a strategic alliance between your family and another. You start to see the convenient loopholes everywhere. You see famously chivalrous knights who treat their squires and servants with casual cruelty. You see lords who are ostentatiously pious on Sunday but utterly ruthless in their political dealings on Monday. The code is a beautiful tapestry, but it's one that is constantly being rolled up and put away whenever it gets in the way of ambition, greed, or necessity. It is a set of ideals to be aspired to in public and a set of rules to be bent in private. This is the tightrope you must now walk. You are caught between the fantasy of the knight from the songs, the pure-hearted hero who is always just and true, and the reality of your position as a soldier in a brutal, hierarchical world. To follow the code to the letter would make you ineffective, poor, and possibly dead. To ignore it completely would be to lose your honor, your reputation, and your identity as a nobleman. The true art of being a knight, your learning, is not about mastering the sword or the lance. It is about mastering the hypocrisy. It is about learning which rules to follow, which to bend, and which to break, and how to do it all while still looking like a hero. The lofty ideals of chivalry have been swirling in your head, a confusing mix of honor, profit, and hypocrisy. But abstract thoughts are a luxury, and yours are about to be cut short. A messenger arrives, breathless and mud-splattered. Your lord has been summoned by the king to join a campaign against a rebellious baron on the border. The tournaments are over. This is not a game. This is war. The castle, usually running on a low hum of domestic activity, explodes into a controlled chaos of preparation. Armor is checked one last time, weapons are sharpened, and horses are shod. You are no longer practicing for a hypothetical fight. You are about to become the instrument of your king's will. The army assembles, and you see that it is not the sleek, efficient fighting force you might imagine. It is a vast, slow, and messy moving city. For every knight like you, there are squires, archers, and men-at-arms. And supporting them all is a colossal baggage train. Lumbering ox carts creaking under the weight of tents, food supplies, and blacksmith forges. An army of servants, cooks, and priests, and hundreds of sumpter horses, the pack animals that carry everything from spare armor to your lord's portable chapel. When this whole creaking, groaning organism finally begins to move, it is a sight to behold, a human river flowing sluggishly across the landscape. And then the march begins. This is the unglamorous, unwritten 99% of every war. You quickly learn that your mighty destrier, the priceless warhorse you ride in battle, is far too valuable and aggressive for a long road trip. It is led carefully by your squire to save its strength and energy for the fight. You are relegated to a smaller, sturdier riding horse called a palfrey, or if you're particularly unlucky, you are walking. The road is often little more than a muddy track, a rutted nightmare that turns to a sucking quagmire with the first persistent rain. And it always seems to rain. A good day's travel is 15 miles. A bad day, mired in mud, might be less than 5. You're not exactly taking the scenic route. You're taking the route that has a prayer of being passable. Of course, you are not marching in your full 60-pound suit of plate that is carefully packed away. To wear it for weeks on the road would be suicide by exhaustion. Instead, you wear marching armor, perhaps a simple mail shirt or a padded jack, maybe with a breastplate over it. It's lighter, but it's still heavy, hot, and after a few hours, it chafes in places you didn't know you had. The damp seeps into your bones, your leather boots are perpetually soaked, and a fine layer of grime covers everything you own, including you. The glory of your knighthood feels very far away when you're just another miserable, filthy figure trudging through an endless sea of mud. The greatest challenge, the one that governs every decision, is logistics. How do you feed this many thousands of men and animals every day? The supplies you carry in the baggage train run out with alarming speed. And this is where the scholarly debate about medieval logistics becomes your lived reality. Historians argue about how much armies were supplied by organized logistical trains versus how much they simply lived off the land. You discover the answer is a bit of both, but mostly the latter. The army's primary source of food is foraging, and foraging is a polite, chivalrous-sounding word for stripping the countryside bare like a swarm of locusts. Your noble vow to protect the weak now directly contradicts your need to eat. Your foraging parties don't ask nicely. They empty granaries, seize livestock, and take anything that isn't nailed down from the villages you pass. It doesn't matter if this is technically friendly territory, the army must eat. Chivalry is for the battlefield, the march is about survival. Your slow progress is dictated by the landscape. A forest can be a place of ambush. A hill can be an exhausting climb. But your greatest enemy is a river. A simple blue line on a map becomes a monumental obstacle. If there is no bridge, you must find a ford, a shallow place to cross. This is a huge bottleneck. The entire army, with its thousands of men, horses, and heavy carts, must cross at one narrow point. A sudden rainstorm can flood the river, making it impassable and trapping you for days, all while your food supplies dwindle. A defended bridge can stop your advance completely. This is the tedious, geographical reality of warfare. Days blur into a monotonous cycle. Wake at dawn, force down a meager breakfast of stale bread and cold bacon. March, 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 make camp in the fading light, collapse into your tent, and sleep, only to do it all again the next day. The enemy is not yet a tangible thing. The real enemies are the blisters on your feet, the ache in your back, the damp that you can never escape, and the gnawing boredom of the endless road. The initial excitement has long since curdled into a weary resignation. Finally, after weeks of this grinding misery, the scouts report that the enemy is near. You have arrived. Your army is exhausted, irritable, and has left a wake of devastation across the countryside. The truly glorious part of war, the battle, is about to begin. But you know now that the greatest struggle, the one that defeats most armies before a sword is ever drawn, was simply the journey to get there. After weeks on that endless, muddy road, you have finally arrived. Your army crests a hill, and you get your first look at the objective, your enemy's stronghold. But you see no army arrayed on the fields below, no banners fluttering in defiance for a pitched battle. All you see is a castle, its stone walls and high towers silent and imposing. It looks, you realize with a sinking heart, a lot like the castle you just left. The rebellious baron is not going to meet you in the open. He is going to wait. And so, the glorious, climactic charge you were steeling yourself for dissolves into a collective, frustrated groan. The long march has ended, and a long, miserable wait is about to begin. Welcome to the reality of siege warfare. You learn that the open field battles you hear about in songs are incredibly rare. They are a massive risk for both sides, an all-or-nothing gamble that most commanders are smart enough to avoid. The vast majority of medieval warfare was this: one army bottling itself up inside a fortress, and the other army camping outside, trying to find a way in. Your first task is to build a new home. The army transforms into a construction company, erecting a sprawling, stinking, temporary city of tents, crude wooden huts, and earthen fortifications all around the castle. This siege camp is now your world, and its horizon is a single, unchanging view of a defiant stone wall. Your life as a knight in a siege is a masterclass in boredom. You had visions of heroic charges and desperate duels. Your reality is guard duty. You stand for hours in a watchtower, staring at the Anute Castle, a place that might as well be on the moon. You are watching for a sally, a surprise attack from the defenders, but mostly you are just watching. You practice your drills in the muddy camp streets. You gamble with dice. You mend your gear. You listen to the same stories from the same men over and over again. The adrenaline of the campaign has evaporated, replaced by a dull, monotonous routine. It is a war of waiting, and the primary enemy is your own dwindling morale. The second, and far more dangerous, enemy is the camp itself. Imagine a city of thousands of men and animals, with no running water, no sewage system, and no concept of sanitation. Latrine pits are dug, they overflow. Garbage is thrown into heaps. The water supply, often a nearby stream, quickly becomes contaminated with all manner of filth. The entire camp begins to stink, a miasma of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and rot that hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. You are now living in a perfect petri dish for disease. The jokes about hygiene from your comfortable castle life seem quaint now. This is a new level of squalor. Soon, the sickness begins. Men start complaining of stomach cramps, of fevers, of a weakness that has nothing to do with battle weariness. Dysentery, which the soldiers called the bloody flux, sweeps through the camp. Typhoid follows. It is relentless, and visible, and utterly unchivalrous. You watch strong warriors you trained with, men who could fight all day in a tournament, reduced to weak, shivering wrecks, dying miserably in their own filth. This is the grim truth of medieval warfare. You are far more likely to be killed by a microbe in your drinking water than by an enemy sword. Of course, there are moments of violent activity that break the monotony. You hear the constant thump of axes and the shouts of engineers as they construct the massive siege engines. Siege towers, great wooden monstrosities on wheels, are built to get your soldiers over the walls. And then there are the trebuchets. These are colossal catapults, the artillery of your age. At first, they fling massive stones at the castle walls, hoping to weaken or breach them. But then, the real psychological warfare begins. This is where you get a truly quirky and gruesome insight into the medieval mind. The engineers start launching other things. Dead, rotting animal carcasses, pigs, cows, horses, are heaved over the walls, intended to spread disease and shatter the morale of the defenders with their horrific stench. Sometimes, they launch the heads of captured enemy scouts or messengers. It is a brutal, terrifying tactic, and any noble ideals you had about the honor of war crumble as you watch a dead pig sail through the air. This raises the question that historians still debate: what is the most effective way to win a siege? Is it this spectacular display of force, the siege engines, the mining tunnels you hear the sappers digging, that will ultimately bring down the walls? Or is the real weapon something far quieter? Is it the blockade, the slow, patient process of starvation? Is it the disease you are deliberately trying to spread? Or is it treachery, the hope that you can bribe a guard to open a gate for you in the dead of night? The dramatic assaults make for better songs, but it's usually hunger and sickness that bring a siege to its end. Weeks turn into months. The seasons might change. The castle still stands. The siege has become a permanent, miserable feature of your life. The army is a shadow of its former self, whittled away not by casualties in battle, but by sickness and desertion. You came here for a glorious fight, to prove your mettle as a knight. Instead, you are stuck in a filthy, boring, and fatal stalemate, where your greatest ambition is to wake up tomorrow without a fever. The weeks of bored, filthy misery in the siege camp come to an abrupt end. The enemy, either emboldened by your army's dwindling numbers or reinforced by a relieving force, has decided to risk it all. They have marched out of their fortress and formed up for battle in the open field. Suddenly, the waiting is over. A frantic, nervous energy electrifies the camp. This is the moment you have been trained for, the reason you exist. You are armed, the full, heavy plate this time, and hoisted onto your destrier. You ride out and take your place in the line, a long row of your fellow knights, lances held upright, banners fluttering in the breeze. The abstract concept of war has just become very, very real. Across the field, you see them, the enemy army. Their infantry is a solid block in the center, a dark mass of men, fronted by a terrifying hedge of sharpened spear points glinting in the sun. You and your fellow knights are the hammer, and that block of men is the anvil you are about to strike. The plan is brutally simple. You will charge, You will hit them with the combined force of tons of horse flesh and steel, and you will shatter their line. Simple in theory. From where you're sitting, staring at that wall of pointy sticks, it seems like a monumentally bad idea. There is an eerie, drawn-out silence before the attack. The shouting of orders has ceased. The only sounds are the jingle of harnesses, the impatient snorting of the horses, and the frantic pounding of your own heart, a drumbeat inside the close confines of your helmet. You look to your left and right, seeing only the steel-encased forms of your comrades, their humanity hidden behind their visors. There is no inspiring speech. There is just a shared, silent, and deeply personal terror. Then, a distant trumpet call cuts through the tension. It is the signal. Your lord raises his sword. This is it. As one, the line of knights urges their horses forward. It starts as a walk, then a trot. You have to fight to control your destrier, whose aggressive training is screaming at it to run. The goal is to maintain the formation, a tight wedge or line, because the power of the charge is in its collective, unified weight. This isn't a race. It is, as you learned from those fight manuals, about building impetus. But keeping that formation is a nightmare. Some horses are faster than others, some knights more eager. The perfect line you started with immediately begins to waver. The trot becomes a canter, and then a full, thundering gallop. And the sound is everything. It begins as a low rumble, a vibration you feel in your chest. Then it grows into a deafening, continuous roar, the sound of hundreds of iron-shod hooves pounding the earth in unison. It is the sound of an earthquake, a force of nature that you are somehow at the very center of. The ground shakes. Your world narrows to what you can see through your visor, a jarring, blurry tunnel of grass and sky. The wind shrieks past the slits in your helmet. You lower your lance, couching it under your arm, the point aimed at the enemy line, which is now growing alarmingly fast. They are no longer a distant, abstract block. They are individual men, their faces masks of terror and grim resolve. You can see the details on their shields, and all you can see are the points of their spears, braced against the ground, aimed directly at your horse's chest. Your destrier, your angry, expensive war machine, is charging toward the one thing every animal instinct it possesses is telling it to flee from. It takes every ounce of your training, and its own, to keep it from shying away. This is the great question historians still debate. How is this supposed to work? How does a wave of horses break a solid wall of infantry? Are you supposed to just trust that the psychological shock of your thunderous approach will make them break and run before you even get there? Or are you a simple projectile, a missile of flesh and steel hoping that your sheer momentum will punch a hole? You have no time to ponder the theory. You are the theory, and the experiment is happening now. The final 100 yards are a sensory nightmare. The roar of your own charge is met by the defiant shouts of the enemy line. There is no time for a final prayer, no time for a clever maneuver. There is only the target. You pick your spot, a man in the front rank, you brace your entire body in the war saddle, and you commit. The last seconds stretch into an eternity. There is no pause button. There is no escape. There is only the inevitable, violent collision. The impact is shattering. It is not one sound, but 1,000 simultaneous sounds, the splintering crash of lances, the percussive thud of horses hitting bodies, the sickening crack of breaking bones, the high-pitched screams of wounded men and mortally injured animals. The world dissolves into pure, terrifying chaos. Your lance either finds its mark or snaps against a shield. Your horse either smashes through the front rank or is impaled on a spear, collapsing in a catastrophic tangle of death that crushes you beneath it. The unstoppable force has met the immovable object. The charge, as a single, unified event, is over in less than a minute. And now, whether you are on your feet in the middle of a shattered enemy line, or on your back with a dead horse on your legs, the real, messy, and personal part of the battle is about to begin. The thunderous roar of the charge has vanished, leaving a ringing in your ears. The wave has broken on the shore, and you are part of the chaotic flotsam left behind. You find yourself on your feet, your lance a shattered ruin somewhere behind you. You are deep inside what used to be the enemy's formation, a churning, muddy sea of struggling bodies. The grand, unified purpose of the charge is gone, replaced by 1,000 tiny, desperate struggles for survival. This is the melee, the hand-to-hand combat that follows the glorious collision, and you are about to discover that it is nothing like the songs. You draw your longsword, its familiar way to small comfort in the chaos. An enemy knight, similarly unhorsed, lumbers toward you. This is it, the moment for the noble duel, a test of skill and honor. He swings his sword at your helmet. You raise your shield. The clang is deafening and sends a shockwave down your arm, but the blow does little else. You swing back, your own blade scraping uselessly off his heavy breastplate with a screech of protesting metal. You quickly realize that this is not a sword fight. This is a wrestling match between two men locked inside tin cans. The ground is slick with mud and blood, making every step treacherous. You shove, you grapple, you try to use your weight to unbalance him. Your heroic duel has devolved into a clumsy, grunting, mud wrestling contest. The fight is a lesson in physics. You remember your weapon training, the endless drills against the wooden pell. Hacking at armor is a waste of precious energy. You need to use the point. You try to half-sword, to aim for the gaps in his armor at the armpit or the neck, but he is doing the same. It's a claustrophobic, close-quarters struggle, where leverage is more important than a sharp edge. More often than not, you abandon the sword for a better tool. Dangling from your belt is your secondary weapon, a mace or a warhammer. You let your sword drop, its strap keeping it attached to your wrist, and draw the mace. There is no finesse here. It is a tool of pure, brutal percussion. You swing it at your opponent's helmet. The impact doesn't cut, it crushes. You see the steel dent, and your opponent stumbles back, his head ringing like a bell. This is the ugly, effective truth of armored combat. You look around and see this same ugly struggle everywhere. The battlefield is not a clear stage for heroes. It's a chaotic, swirling scrum. This is a point historians still argue. Was the melee a complete free-for-all? Or did it retain some tactical cohesion? You see evidence of both. Over there, 3 knights from your own side are fighting back-to-back in a small circle, a disciplined convoys, protecting each other and working together to fend off a swarm of foot soldiers. But just a few feet away, a lone knight is being pulled down by 3 peasants with farm implements. There is no front line, no clear objective. It is a desperate, swirling brawl under a sky filled with the sounds of shouting, grunting, and the percussive, endless clang of steel on steel. You finally manage to bring your opponent down. He slips in the mud and lands on his back with a heavy thud. He is helpless for a moment, trying to get up, a task made nearly impossible by his armor and the treacherous ground. Is the fight over? No. An enemy on the ground is just an enemy who is easier to kill. You stand over him, and this is where the last vestiges of tournament chivalry die. You draw the long, thin dagger from your belt. It is called the misericord, which translates to mercy. Its purpose is anything but. It is too thin for fighting, but it is perfect for one thing: slipping through the eye slit of a helmet or the gap in the armpit armor of a downed foe. To give the gift of mercy is to end his struggle and to ensure he doesn't get up and stab you in the back 2 minutes later. It is a grim, practical, and necessary act in a fight where there are no referees. The most overwhelming sensation is not fear, but exhaustion. Every muscle in your body is on fire. You are gasping for air, your own breath hot and moist inside your helmet. The 60 pounds of steel that was your protection now feels like a leaden shroud, actively trying to pull you down into the mud. Your stamina is draining away with every clumsy swing, every desperate shove. You realize that this fight will not be won by the most skillful swordsman, but by the man who can stay on his feet the longest. It is a battle of attrition, and you are losing. Your grand ambitions of winning the day for your king have shrunk to a single, desperate thought: just survive the next minute. Just stay standing. Just breathe. The chaotic noise of the melee finally fades, replaced by the harrowing soundscape of its aftermath, the groans of the wounded and the eerie silence of the dead. Adrenaline, the miraculous chemical that kept you fighting, drains away, and in its place, a new sensation floods your awareness. It is a searing, white-hot pain. During the brawl, a common foot soldier with a poleaxe caught you on the thigh, his weapon sharpened hook biting deep through a weak point in your armor's joint. The battle may be over, but your personal war for survival has just begun. Your squire, his face pale with fear, helps you limp from the field of carnage. You are half carried, half dragged towards a large tent from which the most awful sounds are emanating. This is the surgeon's station, the last place on earth you want to be. The air grows thick with the coppery smell of blood and something else, a foul, sickly sweet stench of infection. The screams and pleas of the men inside are a prelude to the horror you are about to face. You have survived the charge, you have survived the crush of the melee, but you are about to learn that the most dangerous part of any battle is the recovery. You are laid on a crude wooden table, your wounded leg exposed. The man who approaches you is not a learned physician in fine robes. He is the barber surgeon. His trade is cutting things. On a normal day, it's hair and beards. He's also the local expert on pulling teeth and lancing boils. Today, his skills with a razor and saw are being put to more serious use. He has no concept of germ theory. His hands are stained with the blood of the man he just treated, and he wipes his tools on a cloth that has seen far too much action. His primary qualification for this job is a strong stomach and a steady hand with a blade. It's immensely reassuring. The surgeon assesses your wound, his expression grim. His knowledge comes from experience and from studying grisly anatomical charts. In surgical text from your time, there are illustrations known as the wound man, a single, miserable-looking figure pierced, slashed, and bludgeoned by every conceivable weapon. It's a visual index of battlefield trauma, and right now, you are a living, breathing chapter from that book. He probes the gash with a dirty finger, and you scream. The verdict is that the cut is deep, but the bone, thankfully, is intact. Now the treatment begins. The first priority is to stop the bleeding and clean the wound. And the best way they know how to stop bleeding is cauterization. An assistant pulls a flat-tipped iron from a nearby brazier. It glows a menacing, dull red. Before you can protest, 2 large men hold you down. The surgeon presses the hot iron into your open wound. The pain is an explosion of pure agony, a white light that consumes your vision. You smell your own flesh searing and hear the horrifying sizzle. The bleeding stops. Now to clean it. This is where a great historical debate plays out on your own body. Some surgeons, through sheer luck and observation, found that washing the wound with wine seemed to help, the alcohol unknowingly acting as a mild antiseptic. Others, following theories of humors and sympathies, might pack it with a poultice made of cheese, animal dung, and cobwebs. You pray your surgeon is a wine enthusiast. The procedure is over. You are given a swig of rough brandy, less an anesthetic and more a gesture of pity, and then you are moved to a straw pallet in the recovery area. Your ordeal is far from over. In fact, the most dangerous part is next. In a world without sterilization, infection is not a risk. It is a certainty. Over the next few days, your leg swells and throbs with a pain that eclipses the memory of the hot iron. A fever takes hold. The surgeon comes to inspect your wound, and when he sees the thick, yellow pus oozing from it, he nods in satisfaction. He calls it laudable pus, a grotesque but common belief. The thinking was that the pus was the body expelling the bad humors from the injury. A weeping, infected wound was seen as a good sign. It was, of course, the exact opposite. You lie there in a feverish haze, listening to the men around you. Some scream, some pray, some fall into a merciful silence from which they never return. You are in a race against the infection spreading through your bloodstream. If it turns to gangrene, if your flesh begins to blacken and die, there is only one, final, horrific option left: amputation. If this happens, you will be held down again, screaming and struggling, while the barber surgeon gets out his saw. He will work quickly. His speed is his only virtue, to saw through your thigh bone as fast as humanly possible. If you survive the shock, the blood loss, and the unimaginable pain of that butchery, you might live. But you will be a cripple. Your life is a night over forever. Your fate now rests not on your skill with a sword, or your courage in the charge, but on the roll of an invisible dice. Will your body's own defenses, by some miracle, fight off the teeming bacteria in your wound? Or will you become another victim, not of the enemy's steel, but of the profound and deadly ignorance of your own allies? The glory of battle is a distant, fading memory. Your world has shrunk to the throbbing, infected wound in your leg, and the terrifying realization that your life is now in the hands of a man who thinks pus is a good sign. Let's rewind a tape on that chaotic, muddy battlefield. In the swirling confusion of the melee, you fought with everything you had, but exhaustion won. A crushing blow from a mace sends you staggering to your knees, your vision swimming, your weapon lost in the mud. Suddenly, you are surrounded. 3 enemy soldiers are closing in, their faces grim. You brace for the end, for the final, merciful blow of a misericord. But it doesn't come. A knight pushes through the foot soldiers, his own armor dented and smeared with filth. He sees the quality of your harness, the fine make of your helmet, the remnants of the noble crest on your shield. He doesn't see an enemy to be slain. He sees an opportunity. He lowers the point of his sword and offers you the chance to yield. This is the strange, businesslike chivalry of the battlefield. Killing a common soldier is just pest control. Killing a knight is a waste of a perfectly good asset. You are a walking sack of gold, and he is a savvy investor. Defeated and helpless, you accept. The surrender is a formal, almost polite process. You remove your gauntlet and hand it to him, a token of your submission. You are now his property. The first thing that happens is that his squires expertly and efficiently strip you of your armor, the very same suit that cost your family a fortune. Your horse, if it's still alive, is also seized. This is the down payment. The rest of your value will be calculated shortly. As you are led away from the battlefield, a prisoner of war, you notice a strange shift in your captor's demeanor. He is no longer trying to kill you. In fact, he is quite concerned for your well-being. He instructs his men to treat you without roughness, to give you water. He is protecting his new investment. You are brought to the enemy camp, and the humiliation begins. You are subjected to a thorough appraisal. Your captor and his friends examine your clothing, your physical bearing, your accent. They are trying to figure out exactly who you are, and more importantly, how much your family is worth. It feels less like a noble surrender and more like having your prize-winning farm animal inspected at the county fair. You are not thrown into a dungeon with rats. That fate is for commoners. As a nobleman, you are entitled to a certain standard of living, even as a prisoner. This is part of the chivalric code, but it's also practical. A sick or dead hostage is worthless. You might be given a space and a tent, fed decent food, and allowed a degree of freedom within the confines of the camp. You are a guest, albeit one who is not allowed to leave and whose life has a price tag. It is a strange, disorienting existence. Then the negotiations begin. Your captor sends a message to your lord or your family, informing them of your capture and stating his price. Setting a ransom is an art form. It's based on your wealth, your annual income from your lands, and your social standing. A minor knight might be worth a few £100. A great baron or an earl could be worth tens of thousands, enough to build a new castle. The entire system is a core pillar of the war economy, a subject historians still argue about. Did this practice of ransoming nobles reduce battlefield deaths, acting as a civilizing force? Or did it create a perverse incentive for wars to be fought not for territory, but simply to capture these human cash prizes, prolonging conflict and putting ruinous financial strain on noble families? From your position as the prize, you're leaning toward the latter. Now for the strangest part of the entire process. In many cases, it is up to you to arrange your own ransom. If you are deemed honorable enough, your captor might release you on parole. This means you give your sacred word as a knight that you will go home, collect the money, and bring it back. You are trusted to travel, unguarded, back to your own lands to essentially organize your own hostage payment. It is perhaps the most awkward fundraising trip in history. The social pressure to honor your parole is immense. To break your word would be the ultimate act of dishonor, making you a pariah in your own society. Your name would be mud. So you are bound by an invisible chain, the chain of your own reputation. Imagine the conversation with your father. You arrive home, not as a conquering hero, but as a financial liability. You have to explain that due to a tactical error on your part, the family now owes a crippling debt to the enemy. Land may have to be sold, silver melted down, alliances strained by borrowing. Your single mistake in battle has created a generational economic crisis for your house. And what if they can't pay? What if the price is simply too high? What if they decide you're not worth it? You are back in the enemy camp, the parole period over, waiting. Or perhaps you are never granted parole, and you are simply waiting for a message that may never come. Your life is in limbo. Your fate is being decided in accounting rooms and council chambers hundreds of miles away. Every day, you eat your captor's food, share conversation, and wait for the news that will either set you free or seal your fate as a prisoner for years to come, or worse, if your value plummets. The clean, swift death you might have faced in the melee now seems like a distant luxury compared to the prolonged, humiliating uncertainty of being a commodity whose price is still being negotiated. The war is over. By some miracle, you have survived. Perhaps your wound healed without turning septic, a 1 in a million shot. Or perhaps your family scraped together the ruinous ransom money, and you returned home with your honor intact but your family's finances in tatters. Either way, you are back. You return not to a ticker-tape parade, but to the same cold, familiar castle. The intense, terrifying purpose of the campaign evaporates, leaving a void. The songs of glory about your victory are sung in the great hall, but they feel hollow. The war was a brief, violent interruption. Now, you must face the long, grinding reality of peace. You might imagine that peacetime for a night is a life of leisure, spent hunting, hawking, and attending tournaments. And while you do get to do some of that, you quickly learn that your work is far from over. Your Lord, pleased with your service, gives you your new duties. You are no longer just a soldier, you are now an administrator, a middle manager. You might be put in charge of a section of his lands, or even granted your own small manor with a village attached. Your new job description involves less sword play and a great deal more paperwork. It is a thrilling career change. Your primary role is to act as your lord's legal and economic enforcer. You find yourself presiding over the manorial court, which convenes every few weeks. Forget the high-stakes drama of royal justice. This is the realm of petty disputes. You spend your afternoons listening to villagers argue over a runaway pig that has ruined a neighbor's vegetable patch. You must pass judgment on whether a baker's loaf of bread was underweight, or if a tenant has failed to perform his required days of labor on the Lord's own fields. The complex sword techniques you learned are of little use when trying to determine who has the right to collect fallen branches in the local woods. The heroic knight has become a glorified small claims court judge. Even less glamorous is your role as a tax collector. The peasants of your manor do not pay their rent in coin, for the most part. They pay in goods and labor. It is your job to ensure that the Lord gets his proper share of the harvest, that the designated number of chickens and eggs are delivered to the castle kitchen, and that every family provides a worker for the required number of days during planting and harvest. You are not a beloved protector in their eyes. You are the well-armed accountant who shows up to take a portion of their livelihood. Their smiles are thin, their deference born of fear, not respect. You are a necessary and deeply resented part of their lives. Nowhere is this resentment more clear than in your duty to collect the Harriet. This is a quirky and deeply hated feudal death tax. When a male peasant on the manor dies, his family owes the Lord his single best beast, usually an ox or horse. It is your job, as the Lord's representative, to go to a grieving family who have just lost their primary breadwinner and lead away the animal that is essential for them to plow their fields and survive the next year. You are legally in the right, but as you look into the hate-filled eyes of the widow and her children, the noble ideals of chivalry feel like a cruel joke. You are not protecting the weak. You are enforcing a system that keeps them weak. This forces you to confront the great debate about your own existence. Historians still argue about the true nature of the relationship between lords and peasants. Was it a paternalistic system, where you provided protection and justice in a dangerous world, and they provided labor in return, a relationship of mutual, if unequal, obligation? Or was it simply a system of organized extortion, where you, the armored parasite, used the threat of violence to extract wealth from those who did the actual work? Standing in a peasant's hut, demanding his last ox, it is very hard to feel like the hero of the story. The days of high adventure are over. The clear moral certainty of us versus them on the battlefield has been replaced by the murky gray of economic enforcement. You spend more time inspecting granaries than you do practicing with your sword. The skills that kept you alive in the melee are useless for this. Your shining armor, the symbol of your status and power, sits on a wooden stand in your chamber, a silent reminder of a more exciting, if more terrifying, time. It gathers dust while you ride out to settle a boundary dispute or collect a toll at a bridge. You have survived war, disease, and capture. You have achieved the status of a knight. And your reward is a lifetime of drudgery, of being feared and disliked by the very people you are supposed to be governing. The songs sung about great knights never mention their skill at crop rotation or their efficiency in collecting feudal dues. They sing of dragons and damsels, of great battles and noble quests. Your quest is to make sure nobody is poaching the Lord's deer. It is a slow, creeping disillusionment, the realization that the heroic life you are promised is, in peacetime, little more than the work of a policeman, a landlord, and a taxman, rolled into one unpopular, armored package. The years, which once seemed to crawl by during the endless march or the agonizing vigil, have now rushed past you in a blur. The wars have come and gone. The Lord you served is in his grave, and his son, whom you once taught to hold a wooden sword, is now the master of the castle. You are an old man. Your days of administering manors and collecting taxes are over. Your new and final, full-time occupation is simply to sit by the fire, a gnarled and grizzled relic, and try to keep the perpetual, deep-seated chill from your bones. Your body is a roadmap of your life, and every road is a painful one. The old poleaxe wound in your thigh throbs with a dull ache whenever it rains. The shoulder that took a crossbow bolt in your youth is now a knot of stiff, useless muscle, making it an ordeal to lift a full tankard of ale. Your knees, abused by decades of wearing armor and riding heavy war horses, creak and grind with every step. Getting out of a chair is a calculated, 10-step process that you must plan in advance. These are the joys of surviving to a ripe old age. You get to experience all your old injuries, all at once, every single day. If you were a firstborn son, you might be living out your days as the master of your own estate. But you are not. You are a knight whose fortune depended on war and service. And if you weren't particularly lucky in capturing prisoners for ransom, or shrewd in your lord's administration, your old age is one of quiet, dignified poverty. You are a pensioner, living on the charity of the current lord, your nephew perhaps. You are a piece of history, given a seat of honor by the fire, but you are also just another mouth to feed. You are a reminder of a glorious past that no longer pays the bills. The world outside your aching body is changing in ways that you find both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Young knights and soldiers return from new campaigns with strange stories. They speak of disciplined squares of Swiss infantry, common men on foot, holding forests of long pikes that no cavalry charge, no matter how valiant, can break. They talk of new weapons that use a foul-smelling black powder, great cannons that can shatter castle walls in days, not months, and even stranger, handheld tubes of steel that fire lead balls capable of punching straight through the breastplate of the finest knight. Your entire life was built around the supremacy of the armored man on horseback. Now, A peasant with a tube of metal can kill the greatest champion from 100 paces away. Your art, the brutal craft you dedicated your life to, is becoming obsolete. You are a living fossil. You sit and listen to these stories, and you realize you are witnessing the twilight of your age. Historians of the future will argue about when the age of chivalry truly ended. Was it at a specific battle, where a new weapon or tactic proved its worth? Or was it a slow, creeping death, a gradual decline over centuries as the world changed? You don't know the answer, but you can feel it in your bones, an ache deeper than the arthritis. The very foundation of your world is cracking. Kings no longer need to beg their vassals for knights. They can raise professional armies of paid soldiers. The feudal system that gave you your purpose is fading. Your mind drifts back. You remember the sheer terror and exhilaration of your first charge, the world a thunderous blur. You remember the smell of the siege camp, the taste of pottage, the weight of your armor as your squire buckled you into it. You recall the faces of men you fought beside, most of them long dead, claimed by battle or, more likely, by some fever in a damp camp. The vibrant, violent, and meaningful life you led now exists only in the flickering, unreliable memories of an old man. The epic songs they still sing in the Great Hall are about a world that no longer exists, and about a hero who bears only a passing resemblance to the person you know you were. You have survived it all. You outlasted the brutal training, the filthy living conditions, the terrifying battles, the agonizing wounds, and the soul-crushing boredom. And your reward is this: to fade away slowly, a relic in the corner, a story for children. The greatest, final irony of your life is that after a lifetime spent courting a glorious death in battle, you will almost certainly die in a bed, not from a sword, but from a winter cough that your old, tired body can no longer fight off. The great knight's final, unbeatable enemy is simply time. And so, the old knight's story comes to its quiet, inevitable close. The fire in the hearth crackles and sinks, the shadows in the great hall lengthen, and the memories of battle and glory fade into the soft, encroaching darkness. His journey, with all its grime and pain and misplaced honor, is over. But yours is just beginning. Your bed is not a cold stone floor, and the air you breathe is not thick with the smoke of a medieval fire. The only battle you face tonight is the gentle drift into slumber. Let the images of steel and stone dissolve. Let the sounds of trumpets and turmoil be replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. Feel the warmth of your blankets, a comfort the night could only have dreamed of. There is no vigil to keep, no enemy to watch for. There is only the peace of this moment, here in the safety of your own quiet room. Allow the story to recede. Let the day's own worries untangle and float away, and surrender to the soft, welcoming stillness of the night.